I, 28F, stood by the freshly turned earth, the scent of damp soil and wilting flowers filling the air. It was my Aunt Clara's funeral, and the sky had the good grace to weep with us, a soft, gray drizzle that clung to my black coat. My cousin Brianna stood a few feet away, holding court with a small circle of distant relatives. Her grief was a performance, loud and theatrical. Mine was a quiet, heavy stone in my chest. I had been with Aunt Clara through the long, slow decline. I was the one who held her hand, who read to her, who made sure she was comfortable. Brianna was the one who visited for an hour on Sundays, took a few smiling photos for social media, and then left. Aunt Clara had been more of a mother to me than my own. After my parents passed away when I was a teenager, she had taken me in without a second thought. Her small, cozy house became my sanctuary. Brianna, her only other living relative close by, had always treated me like an intruder, a charity case living off her family's generosity. She never seemed to understand that Aunt Clara's love was a gift, not a resource to be divided. As the small crowd began to disperse, Brianna's voice cut through the somber quiet. She was talking to our Uncle Robert, her voice pitched to carry. "It was just so much work, you know," she said, dabbing at her dry eyes with a pristine tissue. Managing her finances, her appointments, everything. I basically gave up my life for her these last few years. Uncle Robert, a kind but passive man, nodded sympathetically. "You were wonderful to her, Brianna. Truly." I felt a familiar flash of heat in my cheeks. I knew the truth. I was the one who scheduled the appointments. I was the one who paid the bills from Aunt Clara's checkbook, carefully logging every expense in the ledger she kept. Brianna's management consisted of calling once a month to ask if Aunt Clara needed anything, a question she never waited for an answer to. Then came the words that would ignite the slow-burning fire within me. Brianna looked over at me, her gaze dismissive, as if I were part of the scenery. She gestured vaguely in my direction. "And Aaron? Well, I hope she appreciates everything I did. Everything Clara did for her. She owes me everything, really. She owes the whole family. She owes me everything." The words hung in the damp air, audacious and deeply untrue. It was a debt I had supposedly accrued just by existing, by accepting the love and shelter Aunt Clara had so freely given. The injustice of it was a physical blow. I said nothing. I just stood there, the rain soaking into my hair, and made a silent promise to Aunt Clara and to myself. I would not let Brianna rewrite our story. I would not let her tarnish the memory of the woman who saved me. The quiet stone of my grief began to feel less like a weight and more like a whetstone, sharpening my resolve. The family thought I was quiet and compliant. They had no idea what I was capable of. The reception was held back at Aunt Clara's house, the very place I still called home. It felt strange and hollow without her. Brianna moved through the rooms as if she were already the lady of the manor. She pointed out a painting to her husband, Mark. "That will look wonderful over our fireplace," she said, her voice full of confident ownership. I busied myself in the kitchen, making coffee and arranging plates of sandwiches. It was easier to have something to do with my hands. People offered their condolences, their words a soft, meaningless blur. They all looked at me with a sort of pity, the poor orphan niece, surely soon to be homeless. They saw Brianna as the heir apparent, the one who had dutifully played the part of the devoted niece. My friend, Maya, 28F, found me by the sink, her hand landing gently on my arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I managed a weak smile. "I'm holding up." "I heard what Brianna said at the cemetery," Maya said, her voice low and angry. "What a piece of work. She owes me everything." "Is she for real?" "That's just Brianna," I said, my voice flat. It was the excuse our family had always made for her. "No, it's not just Brianna," Maya insisted. "It's cruel, Aaron. And it's a lie. You were the one here day in and day out. Everyone knows that." "Did they?" I looked around the crowded living room. I saw them flocking to Brianna, listening to her exaggerated tales of sacrifice. I saw them nodding and murmuring their approval. I wasn't so sure they did know. Or maybe they just preferred Brianna's version of the story. It was louder. It was more dramatic. My quiet, steady devotion was invisible next to her grandstanding. Later that evening, after everyone had finally left, the house fell into a profound silence. It was just me and the ghost of Aunt Clara's presence. I walked through the rooms, tracing my fingers over the furniture she had loved. I ended up in her bedroom, a place I had spent so many hours in over the last year. It still smelled faintly of her lavender sachets. I sat on the edge of her bed, the grief I had been holding back all day finally overwhelming me. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot. I was crying for the loss of her kindness and her laughter. But I was also crying for myself, for the fresh wound Brianna's words had inflicted. As I sat there, my eyes fell upon the small antique writing desk in the corner. Aunt Clara had loved to write letters there. On top of the closed lid sat a single sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in her familiar, elegant script. My breath caught in my throat. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly. It was thick, heavier than a simple card. I broke the seal and unfolded the pages within. "My dearest Aaron," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. Do not be sad for too long. I have lived a full life, and my greatest joy in these later years has been you. You have been the daughter of my heart." Fresh tears welled in my eyes as I read her words. "I am writing this because I worry about you." The letter continued. "I worry about Brianna. I know how she is. She sees family as a competition, and she has always resented the bond we share. She will try to take what she believes is hers. She will try to make you feel small. Do not let her." It was as if Aunt Clara were speaking directly to me from across the veil, her words a balm on my raw nerves. She does not know the contents of my will. She assumes everything will go to her as the dutiful niece. She has no idea what I have arranged. But the will is only part of it. There is more you need to know. Brianna's help with my finances was not the help she claimed it to be. I am not a foolish old woman, Aaron. I saw things. I noticed discrepancies. My heart started to beat faster. Discrepancies? I have kept records, detailed ones. Brianna thinks I was too frail to notice, too trusting to question her. She is wrong. In the bottom drawer of this desk, there is a false bottom. You will find my private journals and a ledger. The truth is in there. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, knows of their existence, but he does not have them. I wanted you to be the one to find them. I trust you to do the right thing." My hand flew to my mouth. Journals? A secret ledger? "The key to the drawer is taped to the underside of the desk chair. Be careful, my love. The truth can be a weapon, and you must be prepared to wield it. Do not let Brianna bully you. Your future is secure. I have made sure of it. All my love, Aunt Clara." I sat in stunned silence for a long moment, the letter clutched in my hand. A false bottom. A secret key. It felt like something out of a novel. But the weight of the paper in my hand was real. The firmness of her handwriting was real. My grief was suddenly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I knelt down and reached under the velvet cushion of the desk chair. My fingers brushed against a small piece of tape. I peeled it back, and a tiny, ornate brass key fell into my palm. I took a deep breath and walked back to the desk. I pulled open the bottom drawer. It was filled with old stationery and bundles of letters tied with ribbon. It looked completely ordinary. Following Aunt Clara's instructions, I felt along the bottom of the drawer. My fingers found a slight ridge near the back. I pressed down, and a section of the wood clicked and lifted. My heart pounded against my ribs. Beneath the false bottom lay 3 thick, leather-bound journals and a slim black ledger. I lifted one of the journals out. The first entry was dated 2 years ago, right around the time Brianna had started her campaign of financial management. I opened to the first page and began to read. I read for hours, the silence of the house broken only by the sound of turning pages. With every entry, the quiet stone in my chest grew harder, colder, and sharper. Aunt Clara had not just been a loving aunt, she had been a meticulous chronicler of her own life and of the deception that had been unfolding right under our noses. Brianna had no idea what was coming. The first journal entry was almost mundane. Brianna came over today, Aunt Clara had written. She is so concerned about my finances. She insists on helping me set up online banking so she can keep an eye on things for me. She says it's too much for me to handle. Perhaps she is right. My hands do shake so these days. Reading those words, I felt a pang of guilt. I remembered that day. I had been in the kitchen, and I'd overheard their conversation. At the time, I thought Brianna was being unusually thoughtful. I had been so busy with Aunt Clara's physical care, with her meals and her medication, that the idea of someone else handling the bills felt like a relief. I had trusted Brianna. We all had. I kept reading, flipping through the pages. The entries started to change in tone. A few weeks later, another entry appeared. Brianna helped me pay the utility bills online today. She took my checkbook and said she would shred the old checks to protect me from fraud. It seems very efficient. My stomach tightened. I knew for a fact that Aunt Clara had always insisted on keeping her old check registers. She said they were her personal record of her life. The idea that she would willingly let Brianna shred them seemed wrong. But there it was, in her own handwriting. Brianna had been planting the seeds of control from the very beginning. I picked up the black ledger that had been hidden with the journals. I opened it. The first few pages were in Aunt Clara's familiar looping script, detailing her monthly pension deposits and her usual expenses, the mortgage, the utilities, the property tax, groceries. It was all there, neat and orderly. Then, about a page in, the handwriting changed. It was still neat, but it was tighter, more precise. It was my handwriting. I remembered this. About 18 months ago, Aunt Clara's arthritis had gotten so bad that holding a pen was painful. She had asked me to take over the ledger for her. "You write it down, Erin," she would say as she sat at the kitchen table with her bills. "I'll tell you what to put." So I did. I became her scribe. Every month, we would sit together and go through the expenses. I remembered logging the checks I wrote for the power company, the water bill, the pharmacy. It was all routine. But now, with the journal in my lap, I started to see a pattern. I flipped back to the journal entry from the day Brianna had supposedly set up the online banking. Then I looked at the ledger. The entries I had made continued for another month or two after that date. Then they stopped. I remembered why. Brianna had come over one afternoon full of brisk efficiency. "There's no need for you to be doing this by hand anymore, Aunt Clara," she had announced. "It's all digital now. I'm handling everything. Erin, you don't need to worry about this ledger anymore. It's obsolete." Aunt Clara had looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But Brianna was so confident, so forceful. We had both just accepted it. We had trusted her. She had taken the ledger and put it in the desk drawer herself, saying it was for safekeeping. She must have had no idea that Aunt Clara had another private ledger. Or perhaps this was the private one. And Brianna had simply assumed it was the only one and that it would be forgotten. I turned my attention back to the journals. The entries grew more troubled. "Brianna called today," one read. "She says there was a wonderful investment opportunity. A sure thing. She needed $5,000 right away." I was hesitant, but she said if I didn't act now, I'd lose the chance. She said she would pay me back with interest from her own money if it didn't work out. She was so insistent. I told her to make the transfer. I hope I did the right thing. $5,000. My blood ran cold. Aunt Clara lived on a fixed income. $5,000 was a huge amount of money for her. I frantically searched the ledger I had kept. There was no mention of it. This transfer had happened after Brianna took over. I kept reading. A month later, another investment, this time for $10,000. Brianna says the first one is doing wonderfully, and this new one is even better. She gets so frustrated when I ask questions. She says I don't understand modern finances and that I should just trust her. She is my niece, after all. I suppose I must. $10,000. My hands were shaking now. This was not help. This was theft. It was a slow, deliberate draining of my aunt's life savings, disguised as familial concern. The entries became more and more heartbreaking. Brianna needed money for a down payment on a new car. She said her old one was unreliable and she needed a safe vehicle to be able to come and visit me. She cried on the phone, saying how stressed she was. I couldn't bear to hear her so upset. I let her have the money. She promised it was a loan. I knew for a fact that Brianna had bought a brand new luxury SUV about a year ago. She had bragged about it endlessly, claiming she and Mark had gotten an amazing deal. She never mentioned Aunt Clara. The worst entry was near the end of the first journal. I feel so foolish. I overheard Brianna on the phone in the hallway. She was talking to her husband, Mark. She thought I was asleep. She was laughing. She said, "The old bat just signed over another $2,000. She thinks it's for her property taxes. She doesn't even realize I paid those online last month with her debit card." Then she said something that will haunt me forever. She said, "It's like taking candy from a baby. She'll be broke in a year, and then the house will be all mine." I closed the journal, a wave of nausea washing over me. The old bat. It was so cruel, so callous. Aunt Clara had heard it all. She had known. She had known she was being stolen from by her own niece, and she had had to pretend she didn't. The image of her in those last few months flashed in my mind. She had seemed quieter, more withdrawn. I had thought it was the illness. I thought it was the pain. I had no idea she was carrying this terrible secret, this profound betrayal, all on her own. She had protected me from it. She had let me continue in my ignorance because she didn't want me to be hurt. The grief I felt was now mingled with a white-hot rage. Brianna hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen Aunt Clara's peace of mind in her final years. She had made her feel foolish and alone. And she had the audacity to stand at her grave and claim that anyone owed her anything. I took a shaky breath. Aunt Clara's letter had said, "I trust you to do the right thing." The right thing was not to sit by and let Brianna get away with this. The will reading was in 2 days. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was expecting the family at his office. Brianna would be there, smug and expectant. She thought she was about to inherit a house. She had no idea she was about to face a reckoning. I spent the next day preparing. I didn't read any more of the journals. I couldn't. It was too painful. Instead, I focused on the task at hand. I took the journals and the ledger to a copy shop and made duplicates of every single page. I bundled the original documents back up and hid them in a new, safer place. The copies I placed in a large manila envelope. My first call was to Maya. I needed an ally. I needed someone to know what was happening. I told her everything. About the letter, the key, the journals, the theft. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. "Aaron," she finally said, her voice choked with fury. "That is the most monstrous thing I have ever heard. That woman. She's not just a piece of work. She's a monster." "I know," I said quietly. "What are you going to do?" Maya asked. "Aunt Clara's lawyer is Mr. Thompson," I replied. "Her letter said he knows about the journals. I'm going to call him. I'm going to tell him I have them." "Good," Maya said firmly. "You need to. Don't face her alone at that reading. You need him on your side." That was my plan. But I decided to do one more thing first. I needed to see Brianna. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to give her one last chance to tell the truth, even though I knew she wouldn't. I drove to her house, a large, modern suburban home that I now realized had been funded, at least in part, by Aunt Clara's stolen savings. Brianna opened the door, a look of surprise on her face. "Aaron, what are you doing here?" she asked. She was dressed in expensive-looking loungewear, a stark contrast to my simple jeans and sweater. "I wanted to talk," I said, keeping my voice even. She sighed dramatically and gestured me inside. I'm just so exhausted, you know? The funeral, all the arrangements. It's been a lot. We sat in her immaculate living room, a space that felt cold and impersonal despite the expensive furniture. The painting she'd pointed out at Aunt Clara's house was already gone from its spot on the wall. I wondered if she had taken it already. I was just going through some of Aunt Clara's old paperwork, I began, my heart starting to race. This was it. The first move. Just trying to get things in order before the meeting with the lawyer. Brianna stiffened almost imperceptibly. There's no need for you to do that, she said, her voice a little too sharp. I have it all under control. I've been managing her affairs for years. I know, I said. That's actually what I wanted to ask you about. I found some notes she made about investments, some large transfers. I didn't see any record of them in her old check ledger. I watched her face carefully. A flicker of something, was it panic, crossed her eyes before being replaced by a look of condescending pity. Oh, Erin, she said, shaking her head slowly. You wouldn't understand. That's all complex financial stuff. Way over your head. Aunt Clara and I had a system. It's all perfectly legitimate. So the $5,000 for that sure thing investment was legitimate? I asked, keeping my tone inquisitive, not accusatory. Her eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? Aunt Clara mentioned it in a letter. I lied smoothly. She was just a little confused about it. She couldn't remember what the investment was. Brianna let out a short, sharp laugh. See? This is what I was dealing with. Her memory was completely shot at the end. She was confused about everything. That money went into a high-yield fund. It did very well, thank you very much. I was making her money. The ease with which she lied was breathtaking. She believed her own narrative so completely. And the $10,000 after that? I pressed gently. The same fund, she snapped. It was a portfolio, Erin. You add to it. This is really none of your business. I was the one with power of attorney. I was the one she trusted. I decided to push a little further. And the money for your car? She mentioned that too. She thought it was a loan. This time, the flash of panic was undeniable. Brianna stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. Are you accusing me of something? After everything I did for her? She gave me that money. She insisted. She saw how stressed I was and she wanted to help. It was a gift. How dare you try to twist her generosity into something ugly? I am accusing you. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I held them back. It wasn't time. Not yet. I stood up as well. I'm not twisting anything, Brianna. I'm just trying to understand. There are a lot of large withdrawals. I'm sure the lawyer will have questions too. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Her face hardened. The lawyer works for the estate, and I am the executor. He will report to me. You have no standing here, Erin. You were just the live-in help. You should be grateful Aunt Clara let you stay as long as you did. Now, I think you should leave. The live-in help. The same sentiment as glorified maid. It was clear she would never see me as family. She only saw me as an obstacle. You're right, I said quietly. I should go. As I walked to the door, she called after me. And don't go poking your nose into things that don't concern you. It will only make things harder for you in the long run. It was a clear threat. I closed the door behind me, my hand steady. I was not intimidated. I was energized. She had confirmed everything. She had lied to my face, just as I knew she would. She had shown her true colors, and they were greedy and cruel. I got back in my car and took a deep, cleansing breath. The confrontation had been draining, but necessary. It solidified my resolve. There was no room for doubt anymore. There was no room for pity. My next stop was not home. I drove downtown to the address listed for Mr. Thompson's law firm. It was a stately old building made of brick and stone. I had the manila envelope with the copies on the passenger seat next to me. I hadn't made an appointment. I knew it was a long shot, but I couldn't wait. I needed to give him this information before the will reading. I needed him to be prepared. The receptionist was a polite but firm woman in her late 50s. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to see Mr. Thompson," I said. "It's about the estate of Clara Vance." "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her fingers poised over her keyboard. "No, I don't," I admitted, "but it's extremely important. It's urgent information that he needs before the reading tomorrow." She gave me a skeptical look. "Mr. Thompson is a very busy man. He's with a client right now." "Please," I said, my voice more forceful than I intended. "Just tell him that Erin, Clara's niece, is here, and tell him I have the journals." The word journals seemed to be the magic one. The receptionist's expression shifted. She picked up her phone and spoke in a low voice. A moment later, she hung up. "He'll see you in a few minutes," she said, her tone now much more accommodating. "Please have a seat." I sat in the waiting room, my heart hammering. This was the point of no return. Once I handed over these copies, the dominoes would begin to fall. I thought of Aunt Clara's words. The truth can be a weapon. I was about to hand that weapon to a man I had never met, trusting that he would use it as she had intended. A few minutes later, a door opened and a tall, silver-haired man in a sharp suit emerged. He had kind eyes but a serious expression. "Miss Vance?" he asked. "Yes," I said, standing up. "I'm Arthur Thompson. Please come in." I followed him into his office. It was exactly as I had imagined. Walls lined with books, a large mahogany desk, and a view of the city skyline. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. "My receptionist said you have something for me," he began, getting straight to the point. "She mentioned journals." "Yes," I said. I placed the thick manila envelope on his desk. Aunt Clara left me a letter. It told me where to find her private journals and a ledger she kept. "These are copies of everything." Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the envelope. He did not seem surprised. He seemed expectant. He folded his hands on his desk. "Clara told me she was keeping detailed records," he said, his voice calm and steady. "She was a very sharp woman, far sharper than some people gave her credit for." I felt a wave of relief. He knew. He had been in on it. "She knew Brianna was stealing from her," I said, the words tumbling out. "She wrote it all down. The investments, the loans, it's all there." "I suspected as much," Mr. Thompson said, his expression grim. "Clara called me about 6 months ago. She was concerned. She didn't give me specifics over the phone. She was afraid her niece might be listening in somehow. But she told me she was documenting everything and that she would leave instructions for you. She trusted you implicitly, Erin." He reached for the envelope, but he didn't open it right away. He looked at me, his gaze serious. "Before I look at these, I need to know what you want to do. This information, it's explosive. It could lead to criminal charges." "I want what Aunt Clara wanted," I said, my voice firm. "I want Brianna to be held accountable. I want the money she stole to be returned to the estate, and I don't want her to get one more penny." He nodded slowly. That was my understanding of Clara's wishes as well. She was very clear on that point. She came to my office a few months back to make some significant changes to her will. My breath hitched. "Changes?" "Significant changes," he repeated. He finally pulled the flap on the envelope open and slid the stack of copied pages out. He picked up the first page, a copy of one of Aunt Clara's journal entries. He began to read. I sat in silence as he went through the documents. I watched his face. His expression shifted from grim resolve to outright anger. He muttered under his breath a few times. "Good heavens," he said at one point, looking up at me. The sheer audacity. He spent nearly an hour reading. He didn't skim. He read every word. He compared the journal entries to the figures in the ledger. He made notes on a yellow legal pad. Finally, he stacked the papers neatly and looked at me. "This is worse than I imagined," he said, his voice low. "This is methodical, predatory theft from a vulnerable person. Your cousin has committed a serious crime." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now," he said, a hard glint in his eye. "We proceed exactly as Clara instructed. The will reading is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Is your cousin expecting to inherit the house?" "She's already mentally redecorating it," I said dryly. A faint, mirthless smile touched his lips. "Good. Let her. The first part of the will is fairly standard. A few small bequests to friends, a donation to the local animal shelter. Then we get to the primary assets, the house, the savings, the investments." He paused, leaning forward. Clara was very specific in her final instructions to me. She wanted the truth to come out at the reading, in front of the family. She wanted it to be public, I realized. She didn't just want justice. She wanted a reckoning. "Precisely," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "Your cousin has spent years cultivating a public image of a devoted, self-sacrificing niece. Clara wanted that image to be dismantled with the truth. Her truth." He tapped the stack of copies. "This documentation is our foundation, but the will itself is the main instrument. I must ask you to be strong tomorrow, Aaron. Your cousin will not react well." "I'm prepared for that," I said, thinking of her cold dismissal of me as the live-in help. She deserves whatever is coming to her. "Very well," he said, standing up. "I will see you and your family here tomorrow at 2. Until then, do not speak to Brianna. Do not answer her calls. Let her walk into this room tomorrow full of confidence. The shock will be all the more effective." I left his office feeling like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders, only to be replaced by a nervous, thrumming energy. I was no longer alone in this. I had a powerful ally in Mr. Thompson, and more importantly, I had Aunt Clara's own words to back me up. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying my conversation with Brianna in my head, her smug, condescending tone. I thought about Aunt Clara, alone in her room, writing down the painful truth in her journals. The injustice of it all fueled me. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be ready. The next day arrived, gray and overcast, just like the day of the funeral. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple, dark blue dress. I wanted to look composed and serious. I didn't want to give Brianna any ammunition to call me emotional or hysterical. As I was about to leave, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Aaron Vance?" A man's voice asked. "Yes, it is." "My name is David Chen. I'm a forensic accountant. I was contacted by Arthur Thompson regarding the estate of Clara Vance. He forwarded me some documents." My eyes widened. Mr. Thompson was not wasting any time. "He asked me to do a preliminary analysis," Mr. Chen continued, "and frankly, what I'm seeing is deeply concerning. There are numerous transfers to personal accounts belonging to a Brianna and Mark Sterling, disguised as payments to shell companies. There are also what appear to be forged signatures on several loan applications taken out against your aunt's assets." Forged signatures. It was even worse than the journals had revealed. Brianna hadn't just manipulated her. She had actively impersonated her to steal money. "The amounts are not insignificant," Mr. Chen said. "We're looking at well over $100,000, and that's just from my initial review. Mr. Thompson has authorized a full audit. I just wanted to introduce myself. We'll likely be in touch." "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. "Thank you for letting me know." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. $100,000. Brianna and her husband had systematically bled my aunt dry. Her smugness, her sense of entitlement, it all made a sick kind of sense now. She felt she was owed that money because she had already stolen it. I drove to the lawyer's office, the forensic accountant's words echoing in my ears. The stakes were higher than I had even imagined. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about justice on a much larger scale. I was the first to arrive. Mr. Thompson greeted me and led me to a large conference room. "I trust you're ready," he said quietly. "I am," I replied. A few minutes later, the others began to arrive. Uncle Robert and his wife, my Aunt Carol, a few other cousins, and then Brianna and her husband, Mark. Brianna swept into the room dressed in a sharp black power suit. She looked every bit the grieving heiress. She gave me a curt nod, her eyes cold, and took the seat at the head of the table, opposite where Mr. Thompson would sit. Mark sat beside her, looking smug. The room was tense with unspoken questions. Everyone knew this meeting was about the will, the final division of Aunt Clara's earthly possessions. The air was thick with expectation. At precisely 2 o'clock, Mr. Thompson entered the room carrying a leather-bound portfolio. He took his seat and looked around at all of us. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice formal. "We are here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Clara Jean Vance. Before I begin, I want to state for the record that I was Clara's legal counsel for over 30 years. This will was drafted and signed in my presence, with Clara being of sound mind and body, and it was updated as recently as 3 months ago." He paused, letting that sink in. I saw Brianna shift in her seat. 3 months ago? I could see the wheels turning in her head. "I will now read the will," Mr. Thompson said. He opened the portfolio. "First, to her dear friend, Mrs. Eleanor Finch, Clara leaves her collection of antique teacups." He continued on, reading through a list of small personal bequests: a piece of jewelry to a neighbor, a small cash amount to the gardener. With each name, the tension in the room grew. These were the appetizers. Everyone was waiting for the main course. Brianna was tapping her pen on the table, a picture of impatience. She looked at me once, a smirk playing on her lips as if to say, "Enjoy your teacups." "Next," Mr. Thompson said, his voice becoming graver. "We come to the disposition of the primary financial assets, including all savings accounts, checking accounts, and investment portfolios held in the name of Clara Vance." Brianna sat up straighter, her pen finally still. This was her moment. "Clara has directed that all liquid assets be used to establish a charitable fund in her name," Mr. Thompson read. "This fund, to be called Clara's Light, will provide grants to local no-kill animal shelters. She has named her niece, Erin Vance, as the sole administrator of this fund." The room was silent. I saw Brianna's face. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look of utter confusion. Mark leaned over and whispered something to her. "Wait," Brianna said, her voice sharp. "All of her savings? To an animal shelter? That can't be right. She was supposed to... She told me..." She trailed off, catching herself. Mr. Thompson didn't look up from the will. He simply continued. "Finally, we come to the matter of the real property located at 45 Pine Street, including the house and all its contents." This was it. The moment of truth. Brianna leaned forward, her eyes locked on the lawyer. Her confusion had been replaced by a desperate hope. The savings might be gone, but the house was the real prize. It was worth a considerable amount of money. Mr. Thompson took a slow, deliberate breath. He looked up from the page, making eye contact with every single person in the room. He let the silence stretch for an uncomfortably long time. Finally, his eyes rested on me. Then he looked at Brianna and delivered the final blow. "To my beloved great-niece, Erin Vance," he read, his voice clear and unwavering, "who has been a daughter to me in every way that matters, who cared for me with love and tenderness, and who asked for nothing in return, I leave my home and all of its contents, in its entirety, with my deepest love and gratitude." For a split second, there was absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, Brianna exploded. "What?" she shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. The sound made everyone jump. "No, that's impossible. That's a lie." She shot to her feet, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. "There must be some mistake. An old version of the will." She promised me the house. She told me she owed it to me. Now, I am in the moment. The room feels hot. My heart is pounding, but my mind is crystal clear. This is it. This is the confrontation. Brianna's voice is a high-pitched screech. I took care of her. I managed everything. She was a confused old woman. This little nobody, she says, pointing a trembling finger at me. She probably manipulated her. She poisoned her against me. Mr. Thompson is calm. He does not raise his voice. Brianna, please sit down, he says. I will not sit down, Brianna screams. This is a travesty. I demand to see the original will. I will contest this. I will sue. Her husband, Mark, tries to pull her back into her seat. Brianna, calm down, he hisses, but she shakes him off. Uncle Robert looks horrified. Brianna, please, he says, his voice pleading. Show some respect. Respect? She scoffs, her laugh sharp and humorless. Respect is what she owed me. I gave her years of my life. And for what? So this freeloader could get everything? She owes me everything. She owes me that house. Here I am, standing up from my chair. My legs feel steady. My voice when I speak is quiet, but it cuts through her tirade. No, Brianna, I say. She didn't owe you anything. Brianna whirls on me, her eyes blazing. You have no right to speak. You lived off her charity for years. You were nothing but a burden. I was her family, I say, and the simple truth of the words gives me strength. I loved her, and she loved me. That's something you never understood. Love doesn't pay the bills, she spits back. I was the one handling the practical things, the things you're too simple to understand. The finances. This is my opening. I look at Mr. Thompson. He gives me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Is that what you call it, Brianna? I ask, my voice still quiet. Handling her finances? Is that what you called it when you transferred $5,000 of her money into your investment? The color drains from Brianna's face. She is frozen. The room is silent again. Everyone is looking at her. What about the $10,000 after that? I continue, pressing my advantage. Or the money for your new car, the one you told her was a loan? Brianna stammers. I don't know what you're talking about. That's slander. You have no proof. Oh, but I do, I say. I am not looking at her anymore. I am looking at Uncle Robert, at Aunt Carol, at the other faces around the table. Aunt Clara kept journals, Brianna. Detailed journals. She wrote everything down. Every conversation, every transfer. She even wrote down what she overheard you saying to Mark on the phone. I let that sink in. I see Mark flinch. She heard you laughing about how easy it was to take money from the old bat, I say, and the ugly words hang in the air like poison. She heard you say she'd be broke in a year and the house would be all yours. A collective gasp goes through the room. Uncle Robert looks at Brianna with dawning horror. Brianna's face is a mask of pure fury and panic. Lies, all lies. You made it all up. It's not lies, Brianna, Mr. Thompson says, his voice like stone. He picks up the stack of copies I gave him. I have copies of the journals right here, and the originals are in a very safe place. But that's not all. He turns his attention to the rest of the family. As the executor of this estate, I have a fiduciary duty to protect it. Based on the evidence provided by Clara herself and corroborated by her niece, Erin, I have engaged a forensic accountant to conduct a full audit of Clara's finances for the past 2 years. Brianna looks like she's about to be sick. The preliminary findings are disturbing, Mr. Thompson continues. We have found evidence of transfers totaling over $100,000 into personal accounts and shell companies controlled by Brianna and Mark Sterling. We have also found loan documents with what appears to be forged signatures. Mark makes a choking sound. He looks at his wife, his smug expression replaced by sheer terror. This is no longer just a civil matter of contesting a will, Mr. Thompson says, his voice cold and final. "This is a criminal matter. The district attorney's office will be receiving a full report, along with all of our evidence, by the end of the week." Brianna finally collapses into her chair, her face ashen. The fight has gone out of her. She just stares at the polished surface of the table, her world crumbling around her. I was helping her," she whispers, the words hollow and unconvincing. "She was my aunt. I loved her." "You loved her money," I say, the words sharp and clean. "And now you have nothing. Not the money, not the house, and certainly not her love." The silence that follows is devastating. No one looks at Brianna with anything but contempt and disgust. Uncle Robert slowly shakes his head, his disappointment palpable. Aunt Carol is openly crying. Brianna looks up, her eyes pleading, searching the faces of her family for an ally. She finds none. She looks at me, a flicker of the old hatred in her eyes. "You did this," she hisses. "No," I say, my voice steady. "You did this to yourself. Aunt Clara just made sure everyone would see it." Mr. Thompson clears his throat. "The reading is concluded," he says into the heavy silence. "Aaron, if you could stay behind, we have some paperwork to sign." One by one, the family members file out of the room. No one says a word to Brianna or Mark. They are left alone at the table, isolated in their disgrace. As Uncle Robert passes me, he puts a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Aaron," he murmurs. "We should have seen it." I just nod. The apology helps, but it can't erase years of willful blindness. Finally, only Brianna and Mark are left. Mark is tugging at her arm, trying to get her to leave. She won't move. She just sits there, staring into space. As I turn to join Mr. Thompson at the other end of the room, I hear her say one last thing, her voice a broken whisper. "But she owed me." Even now, even with everything exposed, she still doesn't get it. She never will. I feel a brief, fleeting pang of pity for her, for the emptiness inside her that could only be filled with money and possessions. But the feeling passes quickly, replaced by the quiet, solid satisfaction of justice. Aunt Clara's justice. The aftermath was both messy and deeply satisfying. Mark practically dragged a catatonic Brianna out of the lawyer's office. The drive home to what was now officially my house was surreal. The world outside the car window looked the same, but everything for me had changed. The weight of uncertainty was gone. The fear of being cast out, of being made small by Brianna, had vanished. When I walked through the front door, the silence of the house felt different. It was no longer a hollow, grieving silence. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. I walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa, the one Aunt Clara and I had spent so many evenings on, and I finally let myself cry again. But these were not tears of grief or anger. They were tears of relief. The fight was over. I had honored her memory. The next few days were a blur of phone calls. The first was from Maya. I had texted her a simple message after the reading. "It's done. The house is mine." She called me immediately, demanding every single detail. I recounted the entire scene in the lawyer's office, from Brianna's initial smugness to her final, pathetic collapse. "Oh my God," Maya breathed into the phone. "I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. A forensic accountant? Forged signatures? Aaron, she's going to jail." "I think so," I said, the reality of it sinking in. "Mr. Thompson seems to think it's a very strong case." "It's more than she deserves," Maya said fiercely. "Good for you, Aaron. Good for you for not backing down. And good for Aunt Clara for being such a secret badass." We both laughed at that. "She really was," I agreed. "She played the long game." The next call was from Uncle Robert. He sounded ashamed. "Aaron, Carol and I, we just wanted to call and apologize. Properly." "You don't have to, Uncle Robert," I started to say. "No, we do," he insisted. "We listened to Brianna for years. We saw how she treated you, and we made excuses for her." We told ourselves she was just difficult. We never stopped to think about how it was affecting you or Clara. We were blind, and I am so sorry for that. His apology felt genuine. It was a crack in the family's long-standing tradition of enabling Brianna. Thank you for saying that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We always thought of you as the quiet one, he continued. I guess we mistook quiet for weak. We were wrong. You're strong, Erin, just like your aunt. That meant more to me than the house. It was a recognition I had craved for years. The feeling that I was finally being seen for who I was, not for who Brianna painted me to be. Of course, not all the calls were so positive. One of my other cousins, Sarah, who had always been closer to Brianna, called me a few days later. Her tone was not apologetic. I can't believe you did that to her, Sarah said, her voice dripping with accusation. In front of everyone. You humiliated her. I was stunned. Sarah, did you hear what she did? She stole over $100,000 from a sick old woman. Brianna says it's all a misunderstanding, Sarah shot back. She says you twisted things, that you manipulated Aunt Clara's journals. I couldn't believe it. Even with the mountain of evidence, there were still those who would defend her. The forensic accountant doesn't think it's a misunderstanding, I said coldly. Neither does the district attorney's office. She's your family, Erin, Sarah pleaded. You're going to let them send her to prison? Can't you just drop it? You got the house. Isn't that enough? I felt that old familiar anger rise up, hot and sharp. No, Sarah, it's not enough, I said, my voice shaking with rage. This isn't about me getting the house. This is about what Brianna did to the woman who raised me. She abused her trust. She stole from her. She made her final years miserable with worry. And you want me to just drop it? No, I will never drop it. She can face the consequences of her own actions. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to a family member like that before. You've changed, Sarah finally said, her voice small. Yes, I said. I have. I hung up the phone. I was done making myself small to make others comfortable. The legal process moved slowly but surely. Mr. Thompson kept me updated. The district attorney was pressing charges. Brianna and Mark had hired an expensive lawyer who was trying to get the journal evidence thrown out, claiming it was hearsay. But Mr. Thompson was confident. Clara's own words, combined with the undeniable financial trail, make for an ironclad case, he assured me. Brianna was forced to sell her big, modern house to pay for her legal fees. The luxury SUV was repossessed. I heard from Uncle Robert that she and Mark were living in a small rented apartment, the same one Mark had before they were married. The fall from grace was swift and brutal. A few months after the will reading, I was in the garden, pulling weeds from Aunt Clara's beloved rose bushes. It was a sunny afternoon, and the work was therapeutic. I was finally starting to feel at home, to let go of the tension that had been my constant companion for so long. A car pulled up to the curb. I didn't recognize it. A woman got out. It was Brianna. I straightened up, my heart giving a familiar lurch of anxiety before I forced it down. I was not afraid of her anymore. She looked terrible. She had lost weight, her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a haunted, desperate look. She walked slowly up the path and stopped a few feet away from me. What do you want, Brianna? I asked, my voice neutral. I wanted to talk, she said, her voice raspy. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was looking at the house. It looks good. You're taking care of it. It was her home, I said simply. I loved her. She flinched as if the word love was a physical blow. I know what you think of me, she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I know what everyone thinks. I waited, saying nothing. I was not going to make this easy for her. The lawyer says, He says if I plead guilty, I might get a lighter sentence, she said, the words coming out in a rush. He says it would help if you spoke on my behalf. Told the judge it was a mistake, that I was under stress. I stared at her, dumbfounded. After everything, after all the lies and the theft and the cruelty, she was here asking me for a favor, asking me to lie for her. The audacity was still there, underneath the desperation. You want me to help you? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You're my family, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. You wouldn't want to see me go to jail, would you? I thought of Aunt Clara's journal. I thought of the words, the old bat. I thought of the years of quiet condescension, of being treated like a servant in my own home. I took a step closer to her. Let me be very clear, Brianna, I said. You are not my family. Not anymore. Family doesn't do what you did. You preyed on a sick, elderly woman who trusted you. You stole her life savings and you felt entitled to it. You stood at her grave and you lied. You humiliated her in life and you tried to desecrate her memory in death. Each word was a stone, and I was laying them at her feet. You're asking me if I want to see you go to jail, I continued, my voice trembling with a righteous fury I had never known I possessed. What I want is for you to feel, just for 1 minute, a fraction of the fear and helplessness Aunt Clara must have felt when she realized her own niece was robbing her blind. What I want is for you to understand what you destroyed, but you can't, because you are empty inside. She recoiled, her face ashen. The tears were flowing freely now, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. So, no, Brianna, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I will not help you. I will not speak for you. I will not lie for you. You will go to court and you will face the consequences. And every day that you are in jail, I will be here, in this house, living the life you tried to steal. That will be my statement to the judge. She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. She had come here expecting the old Erin, the quiet, compliant girl she could bully and manipulate. She had found someone else entirely. Without another word, she turned and fled. She practically ran back to her car and drove away, tires squealing. I stood there in the garden for a long time, the sun on my face. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of peace. The last ghost had been exorcised. The final debt had been paid, not by me, but by her. Brianna pleaded guilty. With the overwhelming evidence, she had no choice. She was sentenced to 3 years in a state prison for felony theft and forgery. Mark, who had cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence, got probation and was ordered to pay restitution. It would take him the rest of his life. The family was fractured, but in a way, it was healthier. The members who, like Sarah, couldn't accept Brianna's guilt drifted away. The ones who remained, like Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol, formed a new, more honest bond with me. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. We acknowledged the mistakes that were made and tried to move forward. I took my role as administrator of Clara's Light very seriously. With the money recovered from Brianna and Mark and the original savings, the fund was substantial. I spent my weekends visiting local shelters, talking to the people who ran them, and finding the best way to use Aunt Clara's legacy to help the animals she had adored. It was meaningful work. It was healing work. One evening, about a year after the sentencing, I was in Aunt Clara's, my bedroom, sorting through a box of her old photographs. I found one of her and me, taken about 10 years ago in the very garden I now tended. We were both laughing, our heads thrown back. She had her arm around me. We looked so happy. Tucked behind the photo was a small folded piece of paper. It was another note from her, one I had never seen. The handwriting was shaky from her final weeks. My Erin, it said, remember that love is not a debt. It is a shelter. I am so glad you found shelter with me. Now, this house is your shelter. Be happy in it. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I clutched the note to my chest. It was her final gift, a final reassurance. I had spent so long feeling like I owed something, like my place in the world was conditional. Brianna had fed that insecurity, nurtured it, used it against me. But she had been wrong. Aunt Clara had been right. Love wasn't a transaction. It was a home. And I was finally home. The house was no longer just a building left to me in a will. It was a legacy of love, a fortress built of kindness that no amount of greed or jealousy could ever tear down. Brianna had thought the house was the prize. She never understood that the real inheritance was the love that came with it. And that was something she could never touch.